of our lives. And I thought this is very true. And I think less work offers very inspiring ideas, conceptual framework, but also practical help when it comes to getting access to our captains and also when it comes to changing the direction of the boat. So I'm really happy you made all the way here from Canada to Heidelberg and looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I was a little puzzled when invited to talk about changing emotion with emotion to a systemic conference. But I really do think it's time to bring emotion into systemic approaches. I actually trained with Watzlawick and Minuchin and at MRI, and even at that age, I kept saying, where's emotion in the systemic therapy? And I think finally, there may be a possibility of integrating emotion into a systemic approach. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. Emotions are at the core of our intimate relationships, and no other context is so infused with and responsive to the ebb and flow of human emotion. The majority of communication is emotional communication. And this is what I actually said to Watzlawick, is like, he was on about communication, but it wasn't emotional communication, which was not articulated as such. And emotional communication involves minute signals about approach and withdrawal, closeness, distance, dominance, submission. And really, affect is the soil in which both attachment and identity grow. So there's been a sea change in the last decade from a cognitive to an adaptive view of emotional functioning. This is due in large part to compelling findings in the affective neurosciences in the past 2 decades by people like Damasio and Ledoux. Emotions have clearly been shown to be an independent and an adaptive component of human functioning, and simply not secondary to cognition. So I have a very simple, oversimplified way of presenting this. We want to promote change. So how do we get change? Well, change is brought about by behavior changing. But how do we bring about change in behavior? Well, we often bring about change in behavior by changing thought. But how do we bring about changes in thought? Well, we bring about changes in thought through changes in feeling. And how do we bring about change in feeling? Actually, change in feeling is highly coupled. Firstly, it reverberates with changing in thought. But changing in feeling, if we make this distinction, the feeling is in awareness, is brought about by change in emotion, which is synthesized experience of lower level tendencies like physiology and other neurochemical processes. So what we have here from this perspective is if we want to produce change at the interactional and behavioral level, we want to change emotion, essentially, and also work with the physiological aspects of it. So it's helpful sometimes to think about these words, affect, emotion. This is just an interesting way, is to think about affect as the roots below consciousness and physiological and neurochemical, to think about emotions as like the branches of a tree. These are the categorical emotions like anger, fear, sadness, and shame. And to think about feelings. So affect is the trunk and the roots, emotions are the branches of the tree, and feelings are the small twigs and the leaves, which are much more socially, cognitively influenced, things like feeling suspicious or confident. And we want to work with this whole system. orienting this towards working with couples and interactions, there are three potential difficulties with emotions in relationships. The first is not acknowledging and symbolizing adaptive emotions that are good guides and not communicating these feelings in relationships. So in emotion-focused therapy, we start with that people aren't revealing their fundamental attachment and identity-related emotions to each other. People don't show up in relationships as they really are, and this causes problems. The next kind of problem is people might express or enact maladaptive emotions that come from wounds that are not good guides to action and meaning, but they're being expressed now in relationships. The third kind of problem is people have dysregulated expression and experience. So we have to deal with all these three different types of emotional issues. So there are three therapeutic aims. The first is helping people reveal previously unexpressed underlying attachment and identity emotions governing interaction in non-aggressive and non-manipulative ways. This is like Buber's I-thou relationship. Buber says that no new breath can be breathed into a relationship without revealing of the thou to each other. So that's one aspect of what we try to do. The next is we want to help people transform their maladaptive responses. So if somebody's been sexually abused and they're now in a loving relationship, they may want to get close, but as soon as their partner approaches them to touch them, they react with fear or shame. This is an obsolete response to a past situation, but it's governing present behavior. And third, we want to help people regulate dysregulated emotion. So when we get into certain people just go very rapidly into high-intensity emotional reactivity. These are often symptomatic emotions, not their core vulnerable emotions. So we get rage often when there's a lot of underlying shame or hurt. So there's an evolutionary function to emotion, and this is the modern view of emotion, that basically emotional responses have been preserved evolutionarily because they've aided survival. Emotions essentially provide an assessment of the degree to which goals or needs have been met in interaction with the environment. So what do emotions give us? Firstly, they provide action tendencies. Probably this is the most fundamental aspect of the fundamental emotions. They reset the organism physiologically, behaviorally, and cognitively to adjust to changing circumstances. Emotions are also our primary meaning system. The brain reads patterns, gives these patterns meaning, and these give us emotional reactions. So emotions give us information about our reactions to situations. And then, and important in systemic perspectives, emotions are our primary signaling system. Emotions communicate intentions. It's always difficult putting up a cartoon, but we see the husband or the partner holding up emotion signs. And we see her communicating, right? Emotions regulate interactions. The cry of the infant brings the caretaker to them. And what's really important is the facial expression of emotions. We're not talking about emotion. We're talking about showing emotion, right? We are impacted by the way others face us. Levinas, the French philosopher, says the face demands a response from us. So we're going to want to show the face of emotion from one partner to the other because it evokes experience in us. That face, if you open yourself, Not if you're thinking, but if you open yourself to that face, it should evoke a feeling in you. Even now, sitting here in this context, that face communicates something, and we understand it universally. There's a duality in emotion work, though. We need to activate emotion in therapy to help make sense of it, to communicate it, but we also need to protect ourselves from it and regulate it. And this has caused a lot of difficulty in terms of working with emotion therapy, because some people think about it's something that's bad, that you need to down-regulate. Other people think about it's something that gives information and is healthy. So we need to work with this duality. Feelings that inform us about ourselves and our surroundings in an unmediated and personally specific manner need to be articulated. This sharpens and clarifies what is felt. But there comes a point when emotions get too intense, when feelings change this informational adaptive function, and overly intense feelings of pain or pleasure lose their meaning-giving function. They become overwhelmingly painful and unbearable, leading to destructive behaviors to regulate them. In this instance, emotion needs healthy regulation to preserve coherence. So we're working with both. You need to be aware of your emotions, and when your emotions are too intense, you need to do something to down-regulate them. Now, an emotion-focused approach to couples, we really are looking at three levels or three perspectives. First, there's a systemic perspective, where we focus on context, interaction, and circular causality. Each partner's behavior helps create and is created by the other's behavior. We also look at motivation, their needs, desires, intentions, and these govern behavior and experience. Survival by means of affect regulation and meaning creation. We talk about attachment needs, identity needs, and attraction experiences. And then there's the emotion perspective, which I argue is the most fundamental. Emotions govern motivation, interaction, and meaning. And we have concepts of primary and secondary emotion, adaptive and maladaptive emotions. And so we want to work with an integration across these three perspectives. So in interaction, we're looking fundamentally to assess interaction along two fundamental interpersonal dimensions, affiliation and influence. We look at cycles, at circular interaction, things like pursue distance, dominant submission, and we externalize the problem as the cycle. The initial change in emotion-focused therapy is interactional. Partner A reveals a core vulnerable experience that's previously been not acknowledged or not communicated. Then partner B perceives A's underlying vulnerable experience and now perceives A in a new way. So I'm working to help one partner show their emotion, their vulnerable underlying attachment and identity related emotion to their partner. And this change, the big change initially, is that the partner then perceives the other in a new way. This leads to a change in the partner B's response. A perceives B's new response then, and this supports a new organization in A. So therapy then involves revealing by the one partner and perceiving by the other partner. And then the perceiving leads to a new interaction. So this is the initial change that we're looking for. Looking now at the motivation perspective, I take the view that survival is a fundamental motivation to survive and to thrive. And there are two major general purpose systems that we're going to work with in motivation, and that is affect regulation and meaning creation. These are the two processes we actually work with. So the affect regulation suggests that we are basically wired as organisms to seek to have the emotions we want and avoid the emotions we don't want. So my behaviors, I get up here and talk because it gives me certain emotions like satisfaction and so on. If it gave me a lot of shame or fear, I wouldn't get up here and talk. So I'm actually being governed by seeking the emotions I want. It's a crazy thing to fly around the world, be jet lagged, get up and talk, but it gives me some of the satisfaction of some of the emotions that I want. And we desire to feel and not feel certain emotions because how they make us feel aids surviving and thriving. Much action and interaction, thus, is motivated by felt satisfaction. We seek to feel pleasant emotions associated with calmness in relationship, with calmness, comfort, excitement, joy, contentment, when relationships meet our needs and help us attain our goals. So there's affect regulation by our partner. Generally, we seek to not feel fear, anxiety, and sadness from relationships. And when relationships fail, those are the things that we feel. But they're regulated, those emotions, by the soothing involved in attachment with others. We seek to not feel shame, anger, and fear in general. And this involves empathy, understanding by the other, and recognition by the other. We also not feel boredom. We seek to not feel boredom, contempt, anger. And this involves regulation via liking the other and being liked, having excitement, and so on. So generally, a crucial role of intimate relationships and marriage in modern society is affect regulation. Now you can imagine about 10 or 15 years ago, I was sitting across the table from my wife, and I looked in her eyes and I said, "You are my affect regulator." That didn't sound very romantic, right? But I think this is really an important way of understanding what's going on in relationships, right? Our loving partners help us to feel calm, secure, valued, and so on. And in troubled relationships, we feel anxious, insecure, invalidated, and bored. It's also important to note that taking care of the other also regulates one's own, as well as the other's feelings. And being liked and liking gives one vitality and purpose. So there's a lot of affective processes going on. So I'm suggesting that relationships in the modern world are our primary affect regulators. And what this is saying too, which is a radical reversal, is that higher level motives such as attachment and identity, especially in adults, are fundamentally constituted by affective processes. So that actually emotion comes before motivation, and motivation develops out of affect. So if we didn't have emotions, we wouldn't have attachment. That's the opposite of how attachment theorists think, right? It's like attachment comes first as a motive, as a motivation. I don't know what it is. I don't know where the wiring is. What I'm saying is actually we come into the world with emotion that leads us to attach. Because softness and comfort and warmth and face produce positive emotions, we then form an attachment motivation. Right? So attachment is an observation that people attach. It's not an explanation. The explanation is how does attachment work? It works through emotion. So we seek relationships and we seek achievement in the world because they give us feelings that aid goal attainment. Without anxiety and calm, there would be no attachment. Without fear, there'd be no harm avoidance. Without interest, there'd be no involvement, and etc. So this is a point of view that we're working with affect regulation. And then we come to emotion, which is the central thing I'm talking about in this talk. And we have made this clinical distinction that I see my arrows are missing and they seem to have disappeared. But, oh, they're there in white. I can't see them here. So we have primary emotions. Emotions are the very first gut feeling I have in a situation. These are not the basic biologically given emotions. I might look at you and feel envy. That's my primary emotion. It's the very first gut level response. And then we have secondary emotions. Secondary emotions are reactions to primary emotions. The most characteristic are often when people feel hurt, they then experience anger and express anger. In sexual stereotype terms, men who have difficulty dealing with their fear and shame often express anger or even rage. Women, often the opposite form of socialization, express their anger in hurt. They cry when they're angry. So these are secondary emotions. And then there are also instrumental emotions which are more manipulative, you could say, but they're in order to achieve an aim, like crying crocodile tears in order to gain support. And then we want to work with people to get to their primary emotions. This is a fundamental task. But then primary emotions can be biologically adaptive. My fear tells me there's threat. My anger tells me my boundaries are being violated. But then, and that's adaptive, or we can have maladaptive primary emotions. I've had post-traumatic stress is the most best example. I'm a veteran from the war, or I've been raped or sexually abused. The door slams, I duck to hide from a bullet. My emotional brain tells me danger is present, but there is no danger present. My emotion system has become maladaptive. So these are the emotions we have to discriminate and work with. So emotion is not just emotion. We have to be more differentiated about it. And then nobody knows what exactly all the emotions are or what's most basic, but here's just from Ekman, the facial emotions, we get fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. And the pleasant emotions of joy and excitement, these are the most basic, but he also talks about shame, pride, contempt, and these relief, satisfaction. Panksepp, who studies emotion in animals, comes up with a different list. They're more emotion systems, but the seeking system, which involves excitement and curiosity, the panic grief system, which is akin to attachment, the fear system, the rage system. So somehow they're basic psychoaffective motor processes, and there seem to be some fundamental ones. So in the emotion-focused approach, I set about to try to understand what are some evidence-based processes for working with emotion. What do we do when we work with emotion? Well, the first set of principles are we try to access emotion. That means we increase emotional awareness of them and or we express them. I'm doing this very rapidly just to give you an overview. Another set of principles involve modulating and understanding emotions. We want to help people sometimes enhance emotion regulation. We want to help people reflect on emotion to make sense of them. But then most novel and most important are the principles of emotion transformation. We're going to work with emotion directly and think about how can we help emotion change. The first principle is that the best way to change an emotion is with another emotion. Amygdala-based emotions, deep feelings of fear, deep feelings of shame and worthlessness are impenetrable to reason. The best way to change an emotion is with another emotion. I just want to get to, there's a quote I have. Spinoza, in an oft forgotten or lost principle, stated in the 1700s, an emotion cannot be restrained or removed unless by an opposed and stronger emotion. So we have to start thinking about, we change fear with anger or sadness. We can change shame with anger or self-compassion. We can change anger or hate with forgiveness, with love, with compassion. So we want to change emotion with emotion. Right? The next principle, which draws on the same basic idea, is the corrective interpersonal emotional experience, where we change emotion by having a new emotional experience with another person. So if we reveal our shame to our partner, and instead of being rejected by our partner, we're loved for it or accepted, this is going to give us a positive emotion where we had a negative emotion, and the emotion is going to change emotion. So the most simple way of thinking about this, if emotion is most fundamentally an action tendency, there's certain approach emotions. Anger is an approach. We puff up and thrust forward. In sadness, we cry out for the lost one, for the lost object. Fear is a withdrawal emotion. We run away. In shame, we sink into the ground and want to disappear. Well, if I'm feeling fear and I want to run away, and then I somehow begin to feel anger, I puff up and thrust forward. I can't run away and move forward at the same time. So one emotion undoes another emotion. The views we've all grown up with, if you have done any intrapsychically oriented therapy, is that basically emotion arises and passes away. There was a cathartic theory of emotion, you get rid of it. There was a completion theory, you process the emotion and it finishes. There are Buddhist detachment theories like current popularity in mindfulness. You detach and observe and it arises and passes away. In behavioral theory, there's habituation or extinction. You feel the emotion and it goes away. What I'm proposing, and we've observed this and there's certain research to support it, is that that's not the story. What happens is we feel one emotion and then another emotion comes up, or we help another emotion to come up. The new emotion actually undoes the other emotion, and it synthesizes with the other emotion, and we get a new novel emotion. So shame is undone by anger, and what we end up with is confidence. Feeling worthless is undone by feeling compassion from the other and being loved, and it ends up in feeling secure or warm or calm. So one emotion changes another emotion. There's evidence for changing emotion with emotion. Fredrickson, a positive psychologist, has shown, and this is the simple form, that you can undo negative emotions with positive emotions. But much more important is the whole theory of reconsolidation memory, where we update memories with new information. And the basic theory here is that the original theory of memory was that there's an event, we encode it, we consolidate it, and it goes into memory. And then the idea was when we have a memory, we remember something, and after that, the memory goes back into storage. But it's been shown now definitively in animals and humans that what actually happens is when we reactivate a memory, the memory becomes labile again. It's no longer a static or fixed memory. And if we, within 10 minutes or so of activating a memory, introduce new altered experience in the present, there's a high probability that that new experience will be assimilated into our labile memory, and we'll get reconsolidation of this memory in a transformed manner because it integrates the new experience. So this is a fundamental change process around emotion, where we can actually change our experience of situations by reliving them in the present and having new experiences in the present. So, one of the ways we found to help activate new emotions is by going to people's needs and goals. Now, I've written about this in lots of contexts. It's difficult to do in such a short time. But we have research to show that basically changing emotion with emotion leads to positive outcomes. So our major premises guiding intervention are that first you have to accept an emotion. You have to feel it to heal it. And I've coined this phrase of you cannot leave a place until you've arrived at it. So to change shame, we have to feel shame. To change fear, we have to feel the fear. But then just feeling it is not enough. We need to introduce novelty. So basically, we found that you can change the maladaptive emotions, and the maladaptive emotions tend to be the sadness of lonely abandonment, fear of insecurity, and shame of worthlessness. And that we're going to transform those emotions by activating other adaptive emotions. And those are empowered anger. This, of course, was made before Trump, right? We're going to generate the sadness of grief. We all have known that grief is a healing emotion. And it's different to the sadness of lonely abandonment. It's grieving the loss, and that's somehow healing. And finally, compassion and self-compassion. So we think about changing the maladaptive emotions with the adaptive emotions. And there's a basic change process which we've articulated, which is people start off with a symptomatic, distressing emotion like helpless, hopelessness, anxiety, sadness of lonely abandonment. We take them to core underlying emotions. We help them to feel deserving of the need, and then we get to a primary adaptive emotion. That's my son and my grandson in that picture. But it's always touched me, maybe because it's my son and my grandson. So, now we come to emotion-focused couples. We're working with emotion. We're also working interactionally and motivationally. But there are two stages. Essentially, the first stage is other soothing. We're going to reveal our vulnerable emotions to our partner. Our partner is going to respond compassionately and soothingly, and this is going to produce a corrective interpersonal emotional transformation. A second stage will be self-soothing, where it's more individually oriented but still working within the couple. So, as I said, interactional change takes first through other soothing. And this is a very evocative piece of sculpture, right? Where these are two adults after a disagreement, right? They're expressing secondary emotions. They're both in withdrawal. Usually one is attacking and the other is withdrawing. but we're going to try to get these vulnerable internal feelings. And it's important to say, it's not an inner child. I'm a 71-year-old man. And when I express my vulnerability, this is what it is to be a 71-year-old man. I'm not a baby when I'm expressing my vulnerability. But the image is helpful colloquially, that there's a vulnerable child inside. And we want to have these two people connect and express to each other. And that's going to be the first stage that's going to change the interaction. We won't be sitting back to back, but we'll be reaching out and touching. So we've shown that it's the revealing of vulnerable emotions. We developed a scale of vulnerability. Vulnerable is defined as capable of being physically or emotionally wounded or hurt, lacking protection or defense. It's not easy to be vulnerable and to open oneself. The problem in Western culture is that we've relegated weakness to sickness, and everybody tries to be strong. Well, you know, that's one of the forms of dysfunction. So in the context of couples therapy, we're helping people to let down their guard, reveal sensitive or painful aspects of experience, exposing your wounds or incapacity to feel wounded to the other. We have a vulnerability scale, which I'll just, in terms of time, say we had a correlation of agreement between raters. We trained undergraduate raters. They could agree with a 0.88 reliability that this person was expressing vulnerability. And then we found that the expression of vulnerability in couples therapy was a significant, unique predictor of outcome. So we've demonstrated that the revealing of underlying vulnerable emotions predicts outcome. But then the second stage is that we are going to get more interactional change now through self-soothing and emotion transformation, where the person, the focus in the couple becomes on your own wound and how to change emotion with emotion. So once present security and validation has been established in the couple, we focus now on more self-soothing. Partners won't always be able to have a responsive other partner. So we're trying to get automatic self-soothing, which is basically, how do I regulate my own emotion? My wife is not there. I feel even abandoned. If I'm vulnerable to abandonment, it's not just a matter of me telling or revealing that I feel abandoned, and particularly with shame. If I feel shame, it's how do I regulate my own shame? And we have begun to work with self-soothing in the couple. How does a person soothe themselves? I just wanted to give you a feel of this. I have a tape which is neither auditorily perfect.
Right, and what about this little boy?
Nor clinically perfect, but it gives you a feeling for how to do this in a couple. So what we have here is a man, they've de-escalated, and now we're talking about his own shame or feeling of worthlessness. And we're going to talk about, use an intervention of self-soothing, where he is going to actually talk to his own little boy in imagination and bring up feelings of compassion to undo the feelings of shame.
What about this little boy?
Well, he was such a cute little boy. He really was a cute, cute little boy. What can I say about him, you know?
So if this little boy were here right now, what would you say to him?
Yeah, I haven't seen you for...
So the therapist holds out their hand in front and says, can you imagine the little boy here? Now in individual therapy, we actually have people talk in two chairs and so on. That's not really necessary in couple. But imagine your little boy sitting in front of you. So now the focus in stage 2 of the couples therapy is working on yourself individually being witnessed by your partner. I'm sorry the sound is bad, but hopefully you can read the transcript.
For so long, it's so nice to see you.
Really? Uh-huh. Right.
Really a nice little boy.
Yeah, can you say that again?
You were really a very nice little boy.
Uh-huh.
A very loving little boy.
Mm-hmm.
You were a very good little boy.
Mm-hmm.
You were a very nice little boy.
Yeah.
You loved everybody.
So at this point he's weeping, right? Or he's tearful. Now this is very important. The wife is seeing it. It's not talking about emotion. It's actually experiencing and expressing emotion that is the change process.
And then there's like this sadness that comes with that, because I guess like you're saying that's kind of what I've always needed. Yeah.
And it wasn't always there, as
Yeah.
we've discussed many, many times here. And that little boy missed a lot as a
Yeah.
result of that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like that little boy didn't get a lot of that, and he missed it over a lot of years.
Yeah.
So to hear it now.
And he's been dealing with that forever.
Yeah. 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 For a long time.
And that little boy had bad eyes too. 5 years old. Right.
Even at 5.
You know.
Because you're saying, I guess like how I'm hearing that
He
is-
was a very vulnerable little boy.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he didn't think he didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Right.
So here he's beginning to talk about as a child he felt he didn't deserve things.
He denied his own value and his worth because he wanted someone else to have that recognition.
Yeah.
It's like, where does that come from? I was
Well,
probably
you're-
6 at the time.
But you're saying that actually he felt like he didn't deserve it, and that's the sadness.
Must have.
Yeah.
Must have felt he didn't deserve
Yeah.
it as much as.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if that's all just a fable that I've invented. I don't think so.
It sounds like it really did happen.
It does. Yeah, I can feel that. I mean, I can really relate to that little boy.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
me. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
It's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. So it feels
I wish I
good.
had a picture right now.
To show us
Yeah.
how he
Little
was.
cowboy belt.
So you have a lot of affection and warmth for him.
Oh, I totally do.
You have a picture of you in some
Yeah.
cowboy outfit, don't
course.
you? Are you about that old?
Yeah, probably.
So is it nice for you to hear?
Oh, it is. And like I
Probably
said,
no.
So at this point, the therapist brings in the wife, but the fundamental process is first that he feels compassion towards himself. And over time, this is him changing his own shame with compassion for his own sense of worthlessness or undeservingness. And these are the basic processes that, on the one hand, your partner, you should reveal yourself to your partner and they respond compassionately to you, and then eventually that you can respond compassionately to your own maladaptive emotions. So I hope to have given you a little bit of a tour of working with emotion in couples. Thank you.
Thank you, Les, for giving us a survey on your work. And for those of you who are interested in learning how this functions practically in more detail, Les will be holding a workshop on Sunday and Monday at the Institute for Medical Psychology on emotion-focused therapy. So most of you will know, and those who don't know and want to jump on can contact us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marvelous presentation. Thank you very much. Allow me 4 very short announcements. There are still some few tickets left for the conference party tonight at 8 o'clock at the Medical Psychology. There will be Speakers Corner now very soon at one level below. The people who want to initiate the German language Fachgruppe monitoring feedback and evaluation will meet in some room in the basement floor. Signs will be out there. And finally, in 10 minutes, there will be here the Skype event where Susan McDaniels will receive